Hey everybody, I'm Reynolds from MLB Network. That's probably where you know me from. But before that, I was a Major League All-Star player, and I played for 12 years in the big leagues and 3 years in the minor leagues. So I've been around Major League Baseball a long time. And I'm excited today to have this conversation. Being an African-American, grew up in Oregon and played all those years of pro baseball. I've seen a lot of change and I've seen a lot of challenges along the way. So with the recent events, the last couple of weeks in baseball, it's really opened up the conversation nationwide as to what is going on with race relations. And so today, Major League Baseball has given us the green light to have this conversation, and we put a panel together for you. So we're calling this Being Black in Baseball and in America. And I think this is fitting for the times that we're in. You know, if you watched the draft, you saw where 30 general managers from Major League Baseball teams held up placards that said Black Lives Matter and emphasized the fact there's going to be change. And they donated some personal funds as well as Major League Baseball and really getting out in front of this matter and talked about a number of diverse things as we move forward, talking about jobs and opening doors and how people are treated in locker rooms, you name it. So we're going to address a number of those issues. And I'm excited to introduce our panel to you because I think we've got some experience and we've also set this up a little different. You're not going to see a lot of the veteran guys you're used to hearing from, but we're going to bring it back to a lot of the youngsters that this is affecting today. If you watch the marches, a lot of college students, a lot of younger people are the ones making this stand and really pushing things through. So we've got a collective group of young guys here, three professional Major League Baseball players. And my experienced right hand, I'll introduce right now. You may have seen her a lot. Her name is Sharon Robinson. She's the daughter of Jackie Robinson. She's had a number of initiatives in Major League Baseball and really made a difference keeping her father's legacy alive and while building her own legacy with baseball as well. So we're going to hear from Sharon about things that have happened through the years, but also a female perspective. A mother who sees their son or daughter leave the household, how do you feel? How comfortable are you in today's environment? So we'll get into that with Sharon, but first I want to introduce you to Sharon. So Sharon, thank you for joining us. Say hello.
I'm happy to join you. Really proud of all of you. Love seeing the guys and can't wait to hear your perspective.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great to hear from a lot of you youngsters. This guy's 25 years old. He went to Rice University. He's with the Arizona Diamondbacks from Louisiana. He's joining us right now. And Jon, thank you for coming in and being part of this panel.
No problem. I appreciate y'all having me.
Big right-hander himself. The next guy I want to introduce is Sterling Sharp, not the wide receiver, not related to Shannon. And I know pitcher with the Marlins. His journey to the big leagues is quite interesting. He was a Rule 5 draft and taken to the big leagues with the Marlins. And I'm going to get in conversation with him about, he's the only guy on this panel that plays for actually an African-American owner in Derek Jeter and CEO. So I want to talk to him about that relationship and curious what Derek has said to that club. So Sterling, thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
I love the dude, man. I love the dude. He also is 25 years old. And the next guy, he's just burst on the scene as an all-star first baseman for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I've known Josh for a number of years. His name's always been in the headlines as a top draft pick and through the minor leagues putting up big numbers and finally broke through to be that all-star first baseman. So Josh has joined us today, and he's got a unique perspective and some things that he started doing with a lot of other black ball players in the big leagues. So I'm looking forward to hearing that from him too. But welcome now, Josh Bell from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Josh, thanks, man.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. Definitely excited for these conversations.
Well, I guess the first place to start, everybody, is kind of where this all came about. And I'm curious your reactions watching George Floyd and the protests, and what were your initial thoughts when this all started? And, Jon, I'll start with you first with that question.
Initially, my first thought was, again, really? And it wasn't so much a surprised again as I just made it seem, but it was almost just like this deep sadness, you know? You hate to see it, and you hate to see it happen to anybody, but especially being from Houston, George Floyd was from Houston. So just the outrage of the city, you ended up feeling that being around it. So yeah, it just hit deeper than it has recently or in the past couple of years, because like I was so close to this guy's, George Floyd's, friends and family.
You know, Sharon, I'm gonna come back to you in a minute because I want to get your perspective at the end of this on why you might feel like there's some change. But I'm gonna hear from Sterling real quick on what were your initial reactions, Sterling. You know, I was joking about your do, I love it, but that's immediately a stereotype that a lot of people will draw to. So I'm curious, with your look and how you carry yourself, what your reaction was.
Yeah, it was like John said, it wasn't really that surprising, just based on the years past and other killings that have gone on. But I was with my fiance, who's minored in college in social action and community change. So just having her to be able to kind of talk about these things has been really helpful for me. And it was just another hurtful video. And I think it hurt more for the Black community and people that care about this, that there was a clear video this time that showed the whole process. And like, there have been videos before that, but this was just kind of just more in detail, and you saw the whole thing happen, which I think caused a little bit more of an uproar in people.
What was your fiance saying?
She was just really distraught. We both take these real personal. We cried for probably that first week of just talking to each other about it, and just how she sees me and George Floyd and her brother, her dad, that she doesn't want that to happen to us. It could be any Black person walking down the street, especially Breonna Taylor. She sees herself and her mom, her cousins. So we're just trying to have other people see that, like, it doesn't have to be, it could be anybody that, you know, even white friends that have Black friends. Like, you want them to be able to speak up and see us in them also.
Josh, pick it up from there.
Yeah, you know, at first was the same reaction as pretty much everybody else. Like, what the heck's going on? I feel like people of color saw it as an again, but across the whole of America and the world, people are wondering, how is this happening? Why was there nothing done? This guy's out screaming, begging. There's a crowd of people screaming, begging, pleading for this man's life. And as more and more reports came out, it was the same narrative. So initially, it's just further confirmation of the things that my parents told me growing up. You know, you can't go here, you can't go there. It was further confirmation that, you know, I'm more likely to you know, be pulled over and be charged with something than people that don't look like me. And it's always a tough pill to swallow, but I'm sure we're going to talk about this next. It's awesome to see kind of the uprising and the collective thinking of the masses across America and across the world. You know, people were really coming together and voicing their opinions and voicing their thoughts about injustice.
We'll definitely get into that as part of the solution and seeing those things. That is a big part of it. I want to come back in a little bit, though, to what your parents, you know, raised you, all of us, and talk to us. But I want to talk to a parent herself right now, Sharon. I'm sure you had a number of emotions from a mother, from a person who's been doing things for people of color in the sport, you name it, across the board as a civil rights icon. I'm curious your thoughts through all this.
Well, just like them, I was devastated, and I actually turned the television off immediately when I saw it happening, because I just couldn't even take it in. It's very, very painful. I cried. I talked to friends. I, you know, found relief in videos. For me, it was now I've forgotten his name. The comedian. Oh gosh. Anyway,
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah did that. The next day, we found this Trevor Noah's video, and I was like, oh my God, he just pieced things together so articulately. But I felt like, once again, as a parent, um, what you feel with our young boy. So I remember my son, who died 5 years ago, by the way, but my son, I noticed a difference in how he was treated when he was in fourth grade. It started actually in second grade, but really got intense by fourth grade. And so as parents, we try to figure out, how do we protect you when we know we can't really totally protect you. So I just felt sick to my stomach. And then I've been feeling since then, gradually feeling some hope. I'm very hopeful in the crowds that are continuing, the marches, and the fact that young people are mobilized around the world. I'm hopeful that, I look for hope. So when New York State passes a no chokehold law, I mean, that gives me a hope. When we see the GMs putting their own money into this, Black Lives Matter, and holding up signs, I mean, that gives me hope. But the important thing is that we keep the conversation, we open up a conversation, because I'm an author. I've written my last book. I wrote about being 13 and dealing and coming of age around race. And I did grow up in a home where my dad, yes, he was a baseball player, but he retired in 1957. So his real commitment to the movement started at that point, and he was very much an activist. And I grew up in a home where we talked openly about race and what was going on to create action. So we weren't afraid to talk about it at home. But I went to a school that was all white. So it took me until I was 13 that I really began to say, okay, I can talk about this in my classroom. You know what I mean? I'm not afraid to go outside of it. And I can also say to my white friends, you don't want to socialize with me? Well, I want to socialize with my Black friends.
How many of you guys grew up going to a most predominantly white school?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too. And I think the interesting thing, how many of you have had phone calls this week from a lot of your white friends that you grew up with? And the thing for me is the biggest question was, what do I say? How do I react? And I think that's why this is different. There's been other things that have happened along the way, but I didn't get those phone calls, and I didn't get the conversation. And most of my conversation was, well, you're not really the problem as much as you are the solution. But as I look at it now, and I listen to Theo Epstein talk about he is the problem because he hasn't really gone forth to make a lot of change, I start to see why I was getting those phone calls. And so I say all that to bring it back to, I said on draft night, and I really believe this, the reason this is resonating so much in our country and around the world is because of the pandemic. Nobody's been able to leave their houses. There is no sports. There's nothing to detract you from it. So I think that's why we're all in this together. I know that was the mantra for the pandemic, but really it is for all this that's going on right now. So I want to come back. You guys all raised your hands, and I wasn't going to go this direction, but Sharon kind of led me this. And I'm curious, how have your white friends that you grew up with and white teammates reacted? John, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I've received, like you said, like I got phone calls and texts in the moments after George Floyd's passing, and pretty much the protest started to escalate and the conversation started to happen. And like you said, I really didn't get those phone calls or texts in the past couple of years. But the fact that we're getting them now, it kind of brings me back to this hope, because a lot of my friends, it's like, hey, yo, listen, I knew about this stuff going on, but like I really didn't feel it or see it. Like it's starting to hurt me now. I mean, I've had white friends reach out and say like, dude, like I am hurting inside, not because of anything that might happen to me, but because like that could have been you. And so what happens now? How do we go forward? And pretty much has been calls like, hey, listen, like whatever you feel like you need to do, say, I got your back, which has been unbelievable. So shout out my friends, everybody's friends, because that's been great. But the biggest thing is like, hey, how do we I want to be part of the solution. How do we be part of the solution? And usually what I tell them is like, well, you don't have to tell me what you're doing. Make sure we start checking for other friends, other family members, because I mean, I'm from the South. So though a lot of my friends a lot of my friends aren't racist or discriminatory. I mean, whether their parents believe it or not, or they believe it or not, like their parents may have some feelings that they don't agree with. And so a lot of times they're like, hey, how can we help? And it's like, well, you can keep posting on social media, you can keep the conversation going, but also like start having those tough, awkward conversations where people need to you just got to talk about it, like just say, hey, like y'all realize Jon is not just Jon, right? Like in everybody else's eyes, like Jon is a black man, like
Yeah.
Jon is a good dude, but like he's a black dude first, like before anybody talks to him. So let's talk about that. And they're like, oh snap. Yeah, okay. All right, cool. And that's not gonna be easy, but they're willing to do it, which has been great.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficult part when you grow up in a community, whether it's black, white, or whatever the community might be. You're part of that community. People know you for who you are. And when you step outside of that, you start to really understand real quick. But Josh, I'm curious your reactions from some of your white friends across the country.
Yeah, so similar scenario. I went to a private school pretty much my entire life, from 5th grade on, and large majority of people there were white people. And yeah, I got reached out by more people than ever before. Specifically, there's a teammate of mine here, Trevor Williams, reached out, and he just asked me like what he could do. He was like, I've had no idea, and I feel ignorant not knowing more about this topic than I should. So what should I read? He's like, how can I educate myself on this system and how long this has been going on? And I feel like the education aspect is huge from this point on. Like I went to an all-white, private school for the most part. And like the history classes didn't really dive into like anything aside from like the civil rights movement. And like from that point on, it was like, wipe your hands clean of systemic racism. Like we're good now. And I feel like that's the narrative. Like from that point on, segregation is illegal. Everything has been fine since then in a lot of people's minds. But if they're open to this communication, if they're open to educating themselves on the system as a whole, I think people will really start opening their eyes and think that, I can be a part of the solution here too. It doesn't have to be like this. It's been like this for a long time. It's got racism by different names, but it's still there. And it really doesn't have to be. I don't have to be a part of the problem by not doing anything at all. So it definitely makes me hopeful that more and more people are reaching out.
Yeah, it's interesting how friends sometimes don't view that at all as being a problem. And the first question is, well, how do you not understand that? How do you not know? And I guess you nailed it, that you're just Josh to them, or you're just Jon. And Sterling, I'm curious of your thoughts and some of the reactions that you've received from your white friends, and then we'll move to a new topic.
Yeah, I definitely had some text, reach out, call, and I've kind of just been encouraging them to, if you really want to get into this conversation, don't beat around the bush. Like, if you ask, like, what do you think about the things going on around the world? Like, I'd much rather you kind of just say what it is, especially with these statements of either teams or companies coming out and putting out their words, I guess. You got to touch on the keywords of Black, police brutality, murder, I guess, white supremacy. Those are the key things that this is all forming from. And I think those are the words that make the conversation hard and uncomfortable for white people. And that's what I've kind of been encouraging them to. Just, if we're going to talk about it, I want to talk about it. Don't try to walk around it, be nice. We got to have an uncomfortable conversation to get anywhere.
Well, I think when we say uncomfortable conversation, it goes both ways. I mean, I got along because I knew how to get along with people. And even though I had certain things happen to me along the way, and my friends would have never understood it. So I just kind of moved on because I had to continue to move on. Have any of you felt that? And now the conversation is uncomfortable both directions. When I have to explain to them, here's what happened when they called that ball foul when I knew it was a home run. And I knew they called it foul because I was black. I'll never forget a game. I hit a home run in American Legion. The ball's 5 feet fair, and the umpire called it foul. Why? Because I'm down in this one area of the state that is straight up racist. And I knew it before I got down there. And my teammates, no, he just missed it. And I was, oh yeah, he missed it. Because I knew I was gonna get some more knocks. But I knew why he called it foul. You know? So now I get that phone call 30 years later. Hey, you remember when we were down playing that game and you said that ball was fair? Yeah, man, I understand now. You know, and so that's the uncomfortable conversation. It goes both ways. And so my point here is that how many of you have kind of had to just swallow what you really want to say just to make sure you're going to get along and not ruffle feathers? Has that happened along the way? Go ahead, Josh. I see you lighting up already on my board.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I feel like we were all in the same scenario as black players in any professional league when we were watching Colin Kaepernick. I don't think he could have done a better job of trying to voice what he was standing up against. And I don't think he had any opportunity to in the minds of masses. Like, there was a narrative, you know, slated against him. He's going to take a stand against our nation. He's going to take a stand against, like, fallen soldiers, you know, and in his mind, he was like, no, in no way, shape, or form. I'm trying to take a stand against police brutality and systemic racism. And the weeks following his first taking a knee, I think a lot of players in all leagues were thinking, you know, is this our time to, you know, kind of continue this narrative? Is this our time to take a stand and try to voice some of the injustices in the world? And the response from the masses told us no. Like, no one's ready to hear this right now. This man hasn't gotten an opportunity to play in 3 or 4 years. He got kicked out of the league that offseason, really. He was booed all across America. And it was tough looking in the mirror, like, man, like, I know I should probably say something about this, but, you know, I'm trying to, you know, make a life for myself. Like, I'm going to retire sooner than I'd like to, and I want to have, you know, money in the bank so where I can do what I want to do after the game. But that narrative's changed. It seems like more and more people are accepting of people voicing their opinions, and more people are accepting of actually listening instead of just taking an initial response and trying to shun people for using their freedom of speech.
And that's in a sport that's 90% black. Now imagine taking a knee in baseball. I've put myself through this scenario, and I know when I played, I'd been calling Kaepernick in a heartbeat, you know, and I don't know if the country's ready for that to happen in baseball. Our numbers are below 8% black in this sport, and it is really looked on at more white kids playing this than our minorities. Maybe you mix in a lot of Latin players, it's 40%. But even a Latin player or somebody taking a knee, I don't think that goes over well in our sport. It's tough enough to do it in football. I'm curious your thoughts. Shannon, Sterling, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I remember Adam Jones, this was a couple years ago, he mentioned that baseball is run by white men. I know for younger guys, me, John, and Josh, we might not be ready to take that risk like Kaepernick did and kneel during the anthem, especially young careers, young guys. We're just getting in, especially me. We kind of want to be that guy. We want to get established enough to be respected and have our voice heard without having our message being hijacked like how Kaepernick did. Kind of like a couple years with Kaepernick, if you mention his name, like what he was fighting for never even got brought up. It was just, he was disrespecting the flag, all of that. It's like, you brought his name up in the clubhouse around friends, and it was just immediately, he's just disrespecting the flag, and nobody even talked about his message. And I just think, like you said, baseball's not ready for that. We might be getting there now, that people are recognizing what he actually was fighting for and the message going on now. But definitely think we are getting there, but it's going to take a little bit more time.
So
You know,
how,
Sharon, we've all said, you know, baseball's not ready for that. I'm curious what that phrase means.
yeah, I was just saying, you know, baseball, I think baseball, like America, we have to help them be ready for that, because now is the time for us to voice our opinions and be able to talk openly about race, racism, police brutality. We may not need to take a knee in baseball, but there has to be some way that we can keep a conversation open and out there amongst yourself as players, amongst your teams, and we have to continue to press forward on, you know, how far we've gotten now with since George Floyd's death. You know, we can't step back and say we're afraid, and we have to know that the league will support us on that. I mean, without being, we don't want to disrespect our sport, but we want to keep moving forward. I'm thinking about like Jackie Robinson Day. How do you guys relate to Jackie Robinson Day? That would be a time for us to make a statement, but it's always been an uncomfortable time for me because they always want to talk to me about the decreasing numbers. And, you know, I want to be able to talk about something that's, you know, I want to keep it moving forward, not just keep looking back. So how do you see Jackie Robinson Day? I'm just curious. Could you use that in some way?
Yeah, I think the thing about Jackie Robinson Day, you would hope it was every day. You know, it seems like that's always the jumping off point. Oh, okay, Jackie Robinson Day is coming up. Let's bring up every issue that we have, programs, things we can do.
Yeah.
Hopefully now this is a 365 conversation instead of one day on the calendar conversation.
I agree. Totally.
So this is another way to do it. Jon, I want to go to you. I saw you getting ready to respond about the kneeling or feeling comfortable to speak up in the sport of baseball.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to move it forward from there. But I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So when you had mentioned, like, you've always kind of felt uncomfortable, like Sterling said, we both feeling uncomfortable having these conversations, but we kind of just said, you know what, like, cool, like, we're gonna be straight. I'm gonna go get my innings. I'll put up a couple of other zeros. Like, I'm just gonna take this L and just move on, and we'll be all right. I mean, the biggest thing for me was, like, I remember in my senior year in high school, I'm from Houston, Texas. So my senior year in high school, I was the only black player. And quite frankly, I was the only black person in the program. We didn't have a black coach or anything like that. So we had a scrimmage at a high school where there was no black players or coaches on that team either. And I happened to be playing first base. And during that scrimmage, at some point from the opposing team's dugout, I heard somebody say, "I got a rope in the tree with your name on it." And it came out of nowhere. And I was one of the players on my team. I already pretty much committed. I was going to go to college, play ball, and they knew who I was. And I lost it. I lost it instantly. Dropped my glove, started walking towards the dugout. I could not hold back the emotions I was feeling in that moment. The one saving grace I had in that moment was the first base umpire was also black. And he got in front of me. He hugged me real tight. He said, "It's not worth it. It's not worth it." And cooled me off. And I just walked to the dugout and I said, "Hey, somebody else got to go play first base. I need to cool off." But when that happened, there was no dialogue after that. There was nobody after that on my team, a coach. There was nobody in my corner that I could voice what I was feeling on the inside. I could talk to my parents, but in that moment, I'm supposed to, I mean, we're in high school and it was like, oh, I'll go to war for these guys. And I mean, some of these guys have been my best friends since kindergarten. And in that moment, nobody had my back. And I say all that to pretty much, it was like, it kind of feels like that. It's kind of felt like that going up through high school, college, even into pro ball. I mean, the representation, because we talk about the low numbers, the representation is so low on the coaching side and the playing side and the management side, where I feel like I'm on an island. I feel like a lot of guys feel like we're on an island, and so we suppress all these feelings and the experiences we have and say, you know what, push it aside. We're gonna be okay. We're strong. We're gonna be okay. You know, and that's not okay. And that's why I feel like this is important. Like, I'm nervous. I am so nervous to be doing this right now. Initially, when they called me, I didn't want to do it. I talked to somebody in our front office, and he was like, I think it's important. It's very important that you get up and you talk. So I think we're moving in the right direction, you know. So hopefully those tough conversations and suppressing all those feelings and experiences will start to change, and the conversation will continue, because I think if people aren't ready to hear it, if the game's not ready to hear it, then somebody within the game is like, nope, you got to hear it. You know, I think more people are open to it now. So it's moving in the right direction.
Well, that's so powerful. And I think the thing I take away from that, your high school story, all the way through though, I lived it. You know, I was the only black kid until I got to the Mariner organization, and now I'm playing in the 1980s, right? We had a instruction league team where we had 15 black players on that club. And I felt like as a person, I blossomed because I had guys to bounce scenarios off of. Am I tripping here? Is this really happening? Or is that real? How do you look at that? How would you deal with these situations? And so what I employ out of baseball and not understanding with the dwindling numbers is you're dwindling a man as well. I mean, Jon sounds like the conversation that Jackie Robinson had in 1940. That's not right. You know, and so you got to have people that can identify with you and be able to talk things through, and that creates the whole person. Go ahead. I see your hand up, Jon. Then I'll let Sharon echo and see.
Sorry. You mentioned like your instructional league team having 15 black players. So, I mean, the moment that I realized that, like, whoa, I could actually be really good at baseball. Like the moment you said I blossomed, I was on my low A team, and there were 5 of us. It was the most black guys I'd played with on a team, and I mean, still they're my best friends to this day, you know. And it was one of those scenarios where, like you said, we're just bouncing ideas off of each other. Where we drove up from spring training to Chicago together, 30 hours. We got pulled over, and we went through that experience, and we got through it and got to Kane County and played, and we balled out together and had fun and struggled together. Some guys struggled, you know. It was just like one of those where, okay, the comfort level was so high because you had somebody who was experiencing things the same way with you. So I wanted to interject that because I was like, okay, I'm not crazy.
That's real cool. You know, I was speaking with Josh earlier in the week, and then Sharon, I'm gonna come back to you, but I was talking to Josh, and you have to create your own scenarios in this. And Josh, why don't you explain your Sunday conversations you're having right now, your Sunday phone calls, and how important that has been. I can only imagine bouncing ideas and different things off of the guys that you're talking with. So enlighten us with what you're doing on Sundays.
Yeah, it was a conversation that my girlfriend and I started. We were watching videos of like the protests in Pittsburgh, and her mom was over for a good chunk of change on that Saturday when they started. And I got to a point after her mom left, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go out there. And we started researching things online, and the protests had boiled over into a riot in the area downtown. And we were seeing videos of, cop cars on fire and broken windows and stuff like that. And she said something that really struck home to me. She said, your voice, your platform is going to be way more impactful than you going into this riot. Okay, because it's like it already had taken the turn. So she was like, if you really want to make a difference, use your platform. Like, come up with a narrative and don't let it die out. Because I know the players will understand this on Instagram. There was that Blackout Tuesday, and you saw it. You're scrolling up and down through Instagram on that first Tuesday after George Floyd died, and everybody, it seemed like, had a black screen. Everybody posted, saying that they were aware of social injustice, saying that his death was wrongful, and was unnecessary. And I was just worried that, the following Tuesday, you wouldn't see any more black screens. The 2 or 3 Tuesdays down the line, the conversation would stop, especially as society started getting back to normal and there was more games on TV. So I started something, the guys that I had in my phone, black players in my phone, called Social Reform Sundays. So it's like hashtag Social Reform Sundays. And it started with that, and a different conversation arose. And then Chris Archer started this huge group message where there's like 150 players of color all in the same group message across the league. And we're all talking about different ways that we can impact our community from this point on, not just every Tuesday, not just every Sunday, but it's like an ongoing narrative that I'm really excited to be a part of. And I'm really excited to look up this time a year from now and see the changes that we've, created in our own communities, but also nationwide because of this narrative.
That's awesome, Josh. That's incredible. I didn't even know there was 150 minorities in baseball. So that in itself is amazing. All right, I appreciate it. Major League Baseball really has done a lot of stuff, though. You look at all the programs from RBI to the Elite Dream Series. I'm seeing more and more kids of color getting opportunities to come through the pipeline. So I can't knock them too hard. They've done some great things, and I do believe the next generation of players, because of some of the things MLB is doing and investing in, is gonna benefit you guys. I want to come back to Sterling real quick, though. Sterling, you had the unique position to play for Derek Jeter's team. And I know Derek met with the whole organization. He was immediately on top of it and immediately making sure people felt comfortable and speaking out. And he wanted to hear those conversations. Mm-hmm. So what is that for you? Does that free you up to know that I have a black owner and I have a CEO that says, yeah, I expect you to express your concerns?
Definitely. Him and Mike Hill, that Zoom meeting we had as a team, it was kind of a reassurance of they won't hold our voices down, and they encourage us to speak up and use our platform. And kind of like what Josh was saying, like Twitter is my platform. I'm a lot better at putting my thoughts down first on paper to make sure it's exactly how I want it, comes out clear. And Jeter was mentioning, for the people that do tweet stuff out, make sure it's how you want it so you don't have to apologize for anything that you do put out later, and make sure it's how you want it. And so that it's just a really good feeling knowing that we have guys at the top looking out for us and encouraging us to use our voice in our platform.
Hey, Sharon, we've talked about so much in the last 5-10 minutes. I really want to hear your thoughts, because the one thing that you amened me on was when Jon was talking about being the only one, and it really did. I mean, it takes us back to 1947, and it ought not be that way. I'm curious your thoughts.
If you guys could create a community and to keep the conversation going amongst yourself, but also figure out where Jon should have gone with that racist comment that maybe have been coming from a teammate. I mean, you don't know who it came from. He needed to know where he could go with that, because if we're going to say they can voice their experiences, then they have to know where to take it. It's like with kids in schools, we tell them if you see somebody bullying you, or if you're being bullied, you have to go to an adult, and you have to find an adult that will listen to you. So they need to know where they can go within their clubhouse, or with Major League Baseball in general, where you can voice these complaints. I think it's one of the things that we should take back, Harold, is where is the safe place?
Yeah. No, I think that's important. But even in Jon's scenario, when he's in high school, there needs to be some way we can connect high school players to that too, and being able to feel you have something there. Hey, I want to move to something else too, and it's right in this same wheelhouse in a sense, guys. We've all touched on, and even Jon told us in his story with his minor league teammates driving across country, been pulled over by the police, and license and registration. I've done a number of speaking with clubs and different teams, but the first time it really hit home with me, I was speaking down in Florida at the Jackie Robinson complex in Vero Beach. And it was a dream series. And we brought in like 160 of the top African-American kids across the country. And I flew down with Commissioner Manfred and with Joe Torre. And, Commissioner Manfred talked to them about the opportunities in baseball. And Joe Torre talked about being a championship person as well as a player. And they were beautiful. And I've done those same conversations a number of times. But when it was my turn, I got up there and I looked out and I saw this sea of black kids that looked like me when I was their age. And the first thing I talked about, how many been pulled over by the police? And to the sadness of it, almost the whole room, hands went up. We're talking about 15 to 17 years old, whether they're riding in a car or they were driving. And I had to take them through the whole process that your life is not worth it. Hands on the wheel. Yes, sir. No, sir. No matter how mad you get, that's the answers. And let him see your hands the whole time. License and registration. It's in the glove box, sir. It's in my wallet, sir. It's sad that that's where the conversation has to go, but it does. And I teach my son the same things. And so my point is that people don't always understand it. I think people, meaning a lot of my white friends, are getting it now. They're starting to understand that. But I guess my question on this long conversation, that long point I'm making here, how many of you guys how old were you when you were taught license and registration and your hands on the wheel and here's what you say? And I'll just go across the board. I'll start with Sterling first.
Yeah, I have an interesting story about that. I don't even remember the first time we've had that talk. I'm sure it was probably around right before I got driver's ed. But interesting story. My dad was an ATF agent in Detroit, so he had some connections around DPD, Detroit Police Department, and Southfield Police Department. But he looked out for me and my brother that we didn't even realize until now. But he would put customized license plates on all his cars. So we had like Sharp 1, Sharp 2, Sharp 3 on all the cars. And that was his way of kind of letting any police officer know, like, if they're pulling over us at that time, they could see the license plate. They might recognize that my dad is ATF agent, and they can kind of make that connection. So that was kind of his way of looking out. But we've had that talk real young, and just trying to tell us how to de-escalate any situation. Like you said, be respectful, make yourself as non-threatening as possible, and just try to keep yourself out of harm's way.
Josh, that's powerful, by the way, by your dad there, Sterling. Josh?
Yeah, similar scenario. My parents were always telling me, can't go here, can't go there, don't touch anything that you're not going to buy. Yes, sir, no, sir, to police officers. Don't be out on the street. My curfew when I could drive was 10:30. My mom would say, nothing good happens at night. I didn't go to my first sleepover until I was a junior in high school. Because like I said, I was in an all-white pretty much life. And my mom was showing me research as a kid that if, a person of color is molested by a non-person of color, their rates of charging are plummeted. It just doesn't happen. And vice versa, if you're a person of color and someone says that you molested them, your conviction rate is through the roof. And so it was terrifying, going outside, whether it was getting pulled over or being in the wrong position at the wrong time. You really just had to keep your blinders on, focus on baseball, focus on school, focus on your dream as a whole, focus on your goals, just to get by.
Sharon, you're next on my board up here, so I'll go to Sharon, and then we'll finish this with Jon. Sharon?
Well, I had to talk with my son when he was in second grade the first time because the teacher told him, you know, obviously being he was in a white school like you're talking about, and he got in trouble for bringing his math paper home. And I had to start talking with him about race and being treated differently, and we're gonna take some action. So that was always a discussion in our house: is what is the next step? What is the action we're going to take? I also had to talk with my son about getting registered to vote. I mean, we've got all these kids out there protesting, and I hope that we are registering them if they're not already registered, and I hope they will also get out and vote, because that is politically our way to raise our voice collectively and say, what our values are. So I think it's something that we as parents, we do with our grandchildren, we do with our nieces and nephews. We're constantly sort of saying to you, stay on target. Your mother talked about, staying in baseball, because that if you have something like baseball, you're learning about working together as a team, and you're on a team, in a team sport, that gives you a different kind of value. But more importantly, it keeps you occupied. And so, with our the exciting thing for me with Major League Baseball is all of our youth programs, because we have an opportunity to reach young people. And I'm hoping that the mentorship happens with you as, we often have the retired players coming to talk to the kids. But, anytime you have an opportunity to talk to young people, your voice is so important and so critical to their development. So I just want to encourage you to, keep using that voice. Find a way to not feel like you're in an island and you're by yourself. And we as an organization have to find a way to really make it a safe place for us to continue this conversation around race.
Yeah, I like the fact that you guys are at the age you're at too, the impact you can have. And Sharon's talking about voting, and the vote. We always think that that's just the presidency. There's so much more. It's all the civic duties in your area, in your city, in your town, your borough, whatever it might be. Superintendents of schools. That's where you affect change. So voting is so important. John, I'm going to come back to you with the license and registration. You take it away.
Yeah. So when I started to drive, when I got close to driving, that's when we had that talk. But talks like that started much earlier. Due to my dad's job, we lived overseas a couple times. So when I was 5, and then me and my siblings were stair steps. So I'm the oldest. When I was 5, we lived overseas in Dubai. And when we moved back, that's really when I found out that I wasn't, that's when I found out I was Black. Up to that point, I was American. Being overseas, I was American. And when I moved back and then started making friends and going to school, that's when I found out I was Black. So we had to have that talk really early with, hey, like, if your friends say anything that doesn't make sense to you or it makes you feel a certain way, don't hold it against them. It's probably this, that, and the other, and it's ingrained and taught, and it hurt, right? But moving forward, it kind of set the stage for, hey, like, yes sir, no sir, hands on the wheel. And as Sterling said, like, de-escalation, and I think non-threatening is the best way to put it. Like, I mean, you hear all of us speak, and we speak eloquently. You would say, or a lot of people might say, we have white people voices, and that phrase right there, that sucks. Like, since when was that ever reserved? And I think we've learned that, not through education, but just in scenarios where we need to learn to be non-threatening and yes sir, no sir, we change our voices. It's one of those things that my parents have talked to me regularly. My cousins, I have 2 younger cousins that play ball, and they're traveling now, and my brother's close to my age, so we didn't really have to talk about it that much. But I got 2 younger cousins, and though their dad is mentioning to them, like, I feel like I need to make sure, like, hey, when you're taking road trips with your friends, remember, like, hey, be safe. You know, it's one of those things that unfortunately not everybody in the country has to go through, and we really do feel like we need to, because we do.
Yeah, you know, the sad narrative of that, and I'll end this part and we'll move on to the next thing, is the nicer the car, the more you get pulled over. But we've been talking about our relationships growing up in white communities, and a lot of my white friends, it was like they talk to the police like that to maybe get out of something. I'm talking that way to save my life. And that is the whole point of this conversation, that change has to happen. So when people are talking about change and understanding it, that is factual, that we're seeing action acting out now. So those are the reasons that you're learning this at second grade or early ages, or I'm teaching my 9-year-old son why he can't run around the yard with a paint gun like his friends. You know, all these things are to preserve life. And that should not be the conversation. That's not the right way things should be. So I'm excited that we're having this conversation, but the country's opening up and starting to hear it, because it's one thing to let them on deaf ears, it's another thing to let people hear certain things. So that's just something I wanted to just carry on a little bit deeper, but it's important to understand that. So I want to come back to you, Sterling, and I want to talk about how do we move forward. We can all have this conversation for another hour of all the different things that have happened with us and what's going on. How do we move forward and how do we exact change? And I'll start it with this. I was speaking with Theo Epstein earlier, who was the driving force behind all the general managers holding up the Black Lives Matter. And he's had some real strong things said, and he's going to make some change. I just know Theo. And one of the things he said is, I'm hiring people that look like me, that were comfortable with how I grew up and they grew up, so I got along with them. And he said, that's the problem. I need to hire people that are going to challenge me and maybe are not like me. And so I believe that exacting change in baseball has got to start at the top on down. And we got to get in positions of power. And I'm sure Jackie Robinson was saying that many, many years ago. But Sterling, I'm curious, how do you see change being affected in this game, not necessarily in the country, but in baseball?
Yeah, first part, like you said, at the top, we got to have Black people, people of color taking over some of those spots, and like you said, challenging other people in those positions. From a player perspective, my go-to is I'm just always a fan of giving back. That's my way of kind of connecting with the youth. I started the foundation back in Detroit 2 years ago for like a scholarship fund for last year. It was 3 kids were winners. It was a little bit over $1,000 each kid. That's kind of been my way to connect with them since I've been drafted in pro ball. I go back in the off season with the little league team that I grew up playing with and go to their practices and just kind of show them that I want to be engaged in their lives and help them blossom into baseball players that they want to be. And just having more, especially Black players, invest in their community that they're from and show the kids that they care about them and that they can be what we are, and they can see themselves in us and what they see on TV.
Josh, you're up. Exacting change. I'm curious. I'll preface it with this: the Sunday conversations that you're having. What are some of the guys saying, and how do you see exacting change, and how will you guys use that powerful platform?
Yeah, I think the key is education. I think the key is continuing to understand the system that we live in, because without that understanding, we're not going to be able to enact any sort of change. So first and foremost, we got to keep, diving into the information, educating ourselves. And secondly, we have to be able to go out into our communities and promote the idea of hope. Because my dad comes from like the slums of Houston, comes from a place called the 5th Ward. And he's taking me through where he grew up, and it is nowhere that, children should grow up in my mind. It kind of looks like, some sort of war zone. Just, it's bad. But he said the only thing that got him to college, the only thing that got him into sports and to end up being like one of the fastest cats in Texas was hope, that he could do whatever he wanted to do. Hope that he could do anything that he put his mind to. I think that it's really important for us to be that ideal of hope to our communities. We got to hold ourselves to a really high standard. There's something that my parents told me growing up, that I have to be that much better, that much stronger, that much faster, that much smarter than my white counterparts just to have the same opportunities. And understanding that and accepting that, so that one day we might be able to change the system so that's not the case, is the only way we're going to go about it. Because I don't think the system as a whole is going to change unless more and more people of color are in power. So it's just understanding that we have to take that and run with it. We have to take the challenge and accept it, and just, continue to pass the baton forward.
Jon, you got the baton.
Yeah, so I agree with literally everything everybody's saying, starting with the changes up top, putting people of color in positions of power, and then from the player perspective, getting out in our communities and other people's communities, right? And just being out and giving back. But to take Josh's point a little bit further, I think the hope is great. But in my mind, for some reason, hope always seems to be passive. Like, you can just hope and hope and hope. Like, when that hope turns to belief, and you start to get the youth to believe that they can do great things and change situations, and the system can change, then you start to get that action. And the action is great coming from us in our communities, and then continuing the next generation to act on it as well. I think earlier when we had talked about the social media aspect, and how this boom in social media presence is almost, or not has almost, but it has raised awareness, and has really the world talking and feeling connected. So, I mean, also just keeping the conversation going alive on social media, because there are a lot of people with a lot of influence that really don't have boots on the ground, but their influence, it helps, just every little bit helps.
Hey, Sharon, that's all. You guys are dead on. And my next thing I want to go to is, how do we get players involved with Major League Baseball and on the same page? Baseball's got all these things going on, all these initiatives, RBI, the Dream Series, all the things you're doing, Sharon Robinson, to the pipelines, everything else. But the one thing that we don't really have is current players involved, and I think it could take it to another level. So my question for you is, how did you get involved in Major League Baseball in the first place?
How did I get involved?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Harold. You came to my house very early on when I got involved with baseball. Actually, I was, my background, I'm a nurse. I was a nurse midwife. I have a master's degree. I have a number of honorary doctorates and teaching certificates. So I was a nurse midwife for 20 something years. And I also was an educator. So I taught in universities, and I headed up an organization with Jesse Jackson, an educational organization, so school-based. I published books. So for this combination of being an educator in my healthcare, and then moving into being an educator with younger kids, I threw out a first pitch in 1997, and in a couple of different ballparks. And I was like, wait a minute now, my son is graduating from high school. I could work national and still work with kids. So I came to Major League Baseball and said, would you be interested? And took a few meetings, but we figured it out. And I started a program which is called Breaking Barriers in Sports and Life. And it really is teaching kids about voice and having the confidence to overcome struggles in their life and move beyond it. So we had a national essay contest. And back in the day, when we were actually based just with our clubs, we would go out into the community with all of the clubs and bring you the players, current players, into the classroom. And that was more effective than just having the kids meet the players, current players, at a ballpark. Like some of you have mentioned, you do that anyway. But in this, what the players had to do was they had to share with kids a struggle, a personal struggle that they have had to overcome in their lives, and kind of help kids understand that players are also, they were young men, they were boys, we've all had things to overcome and barriers to break in our personal lives. Currently, I am now very excited to be working with Tony and his group. And we have this Jackie Robinson Center in Vero. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to, as Harold has been there, and I'm hoping to find some way to bring current players there as well and meet with kids. And hopefully we'll have, one of the things we'll do is have a forum on race at the Jackie Robinson Center in Vero. So, I mean, still things, a work in progress, but that's my long-term goal, is kind of focus out of Vero. I don't want to travel so much anymore. So I'm hoping to kind of solidify my energies out of the Vero Beach site and make it about what's going on today, and so it's really exciting for us to be able to reach boys and girls, Black, Latino, white, I mean, kids all over the country, and Canada and Puerto Rico, and help them continue to lift their voice and support them in that effort.
Yeah, I think in all that you're talking about, the reason I asked Sharon that is you got to have a vision of things that you see you want to do. And I'll end it with this. We wrap this whole thing up. My first thought was, how many of you guys would be comfortable sitting with your general manager or owner and discussing these things? And I know Sterling said he wouldn't have a problem sitting with Jeter and that would be effective. But I'm curious, not just of us on this panel, but everybody in baseball should have that opportunity to sit down with their GM and their owner to talk about these matters. And so I'll end it with this. We'll go across the panel, then I'll wrap it up. But Jon, as you sit here now and you think about affecting change, and you got all the tools of Major League Baseball behind you, what would you like to see and what would you like to implement and see done?
My imagination is not that great. I would like to see more stuff like the Dream Series. I think my cousin went to the Dream Series 2 summers ago, I believe. And I mean, he loved it, and I don't remember, I wasn't a prospect in high school, but I don't remember ever hearing about opportunities for stuff like that for me. And I mean, selfishly, like I would have loved to do that, be put in scenarios where I got to play ball, learn about the game, learn about life in scenarios where I was around people that shared experiences with me. Because I lacked that growing up. So I need some more time to think about it. And I'm definitely going to spend some time thinking about it, but it would have to do with growing the game in communities where it seems like the game is lacking,
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Sterling, I'm curious what you might be hoping to do.
Yeah, one of my boys actually hit me with this idea of kind of have like a summer, I guess, field trip, I guess you could say, where you bring kids either from the PAL leagues or RBI leagues, and they have like a whole day at a MLB game or a stadium with all expenses paid for. And you take, let's say, 20, 30 kids and hopefully grow the game that way, where you can get them on the field, talk to a couple players, just kind of sit them down and try to get them to enjoy the game, since right now I guess we have the average age of a fan is like 50-something years old. Just kind of getting the younger kids out as early as possible to show them that this game is cool and it is fun to play, and we can get them involved also.
Yeah, that's a word that's been missing. It's cool, man, and definitely is. Josh, curious, this is your last thoughts you got on this and what you'd like to see happen and what you might be planning or maybe already doing.
Yeah, actually had a really good conversation with, it was a Zoom call just like this with our GM, our manager, a couple scouts, a couple coaches, and a couple players. I want to say 2 days ago. And they asked me that same question. And my answer was, let's start like a book club, not just for the organization, but for our community. with giveaways. So as Sterling was saying, so if you're a part of this book club, you have the chance to be on the field for batting practice, go to the game, bring 3 or 4 friends or whatever it might be. And let's make it a monthly thing. Let's make it a monthly ordeal where, you know, people from different age groups have the opportunity to not only educate themselves and care about the things that we care about as an organization, but care about things that are going to enact change in the future. And I felt so empowered to have the support from our GM, who, you know, showed me his receipt that he just ordered the new Jim Crow, which is a book that I'm reading right now. It's the book that I suggested for Trevor Williams. And it's a book that I suggest for pretty much everybody on this call and across America. So just continuing the narrative of education and promoting the game itself in communities and doing right by communities is where I see this going. And I think we have every opportunity in the world as long as this conversation continues.
If you think the conversations are not having an effect, or if the things of the last couple of weeks haven't brought about change, Josh, would you have ever had those conversations with your organization a year ago?
Not at all. In no way, shape, or form.
You know, so that's what's happening here. And Sharon, I'm gonna let you get in your final thoughts, and then I'll wrap this whole thing up.
Well, I would like to, I love all of your ideas, but I'd also like to see a leadership development program that gets our players of color moving beyond the field and thinking beyond the field. So when you retire, you would have a place still in baseball, and you could move up the ladder and move into leadership roles at Major League Baseball. My last thought is Jackie Robinson Foundation. We'd love to have, you know, your young voices reaching out. We have, you know, conference every year where we have 500 kids of color, mostly African-American kids in colleges all over the country who are thinking about leadership, and to be able to have one of you or any of you come in and speak to them. You know, I know it's during in March, but somehow I'd like to connect you, the current players, to the Jackie Robinson Foundation, because those young people need your support as well.
Well, I can't thank everybody on this panel enough. It's been powerful. And I want to thank Major League Baseball for even allowing us to put this on and letting the whole country hear your viewpoints. You are the future. I love the fact you guys are 25 and 27 years old, and you're already having major impacts and doing things in your communities. The stories were phenomenal. Hopefully somebody out there is listening and it resonated with you. But I will end it with this, that actions speak louder than words. And we're seeing action already that we've never seen before. Just simply hearing what the Pittsburgh Pirates are doing, to even have a conversation with Josh is powerful. Watching Theo Epstein, Kenny Williams, Farhan Zaidi, Mike Hill, all those general managers, to see what Derek Jeter's doing down in Miami. Across the board, I could go on and on and on. There is change happening, and things are moving. And it's not about just writing a check, but it's getting involved. And so I just hope that the rest of the country understands that. And I'll leave it with this. The last thing, as far as African-American player participation, we got to address this travel ball, because that is where kids are not having an opportunity to play. It costs so much with the expenses. But we'll get there with this next generation of guys that are coming on and the conversations that they're having. So I've been your host, Harold Reynolds. It's been awesome to be a part of this. Thank you.
You're amazing, Harold. Thank you.
I'm staying busy, Sharon. But you know what? This was absolutely awesome. And being Black in baseball and in America is a great thing right now. And we're going to continue to fight this fight. Appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Indeed.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.